because China's into basketball and 1 billion people are over there buying his shirts. And there's a world market where you can sell this stuff. So whatever little disparities there are magnified by world trade isn't a problem. It's a problem if people are envious. But my experience, and we are, I'm envious of my brother-in-law who's richer than I am. But to the point we want to take it from them, if people understand that we're all free and some people, it's not fair that Angelina Jolie is better looking than most of us, or Brad Pitt. Life isn't fair. So I don't think it should be a problem. Yes, sir.
John, I manage software engineering analysis department. My dad's a big fan. Skeptic slash enemy.
Well, thank you for coming, skeptic slash enemy.
I want to ask you your thoughts on climate. I've read some of the things, watched some of the things that you've written and said about climate change. Even you seem to acknowledge that probably there's an element of that that's man-made, but most of your critiques have been levied against those who regulate, tax, and subsidize all the things that are familiar with that. And so I'm wondering what you would conclude a libertarian solution to that.
There's no libertarian solution to climate change. As I said, pollution is an area for government. And if it's a problem, that would have to be addressed by government, or governments in this case, since it's worldwide. But just to think about it, Bill O'Reilly the other day said, they say you're a moron if you don't believe in climate change. Well, you are a moron if you don't believe in climate change. Climate changes. It always has, always will. And the last 1,000 years, we're in a warming trend. It's changing. But there are 3 other pieces to it. Does man play a part? Is it changing because of man? If it is, it's awfully weird that most of the change happened in the beginning of the century, not in the second half of the century when there was much more greenhouse gas emissions. And the last 17 years, it hasn't warmed at all. But still, that could just be an aberration. It may very well be that man's carbon dioxide output is making it worse. I don't know. But there are the 2 bigger ones. Is it a catastrophe? You got 1 million kids dying of diarrhea every year in the world. For a few cents and a couple of vitamins, you could save those lives. That's a crisis. Malaria, that's a crisis. The growth of government, about to have an explosion in America when old people find that their health care isn't being paid for, or the government inflates the currency so much that it's worthless, that's a crisis. Global warming, we can adjust. Warmer weather actually kills fewer people. Cold weather kills many more people. Since the globe is warmed, we have less starvation. We used to have famines. Often, we don't have any anymore. There's more crop output. Now, that's not just because of warming. We're just getting smarter about producing food. Good things are happening. If the Antarctic melts and the water levels rise, people will suffer. I already lost a beach house. But that's another story. You helped me pay for it. Thanks. That's another government scam. We can adjust to that. We can pull back from the coast, or we can build up. Rather than what we're doing now, which is spending billions and billions of dollars giving it to Al Gore's cronies for schemes and windmills and things that barely produce any energy. Even if we all jumped on the bandwagon and did more of that, and all of you rode bicycles all the time, and stopped eating meat, and did all the things that the perfect environmentalists would have you do. Even the IPCC says it would make 1/10 of a degree difference over the next 50 years. It wouldn't make any difference. There is nothing, if this is a problem, which is unlikely, there is nothing we can do about it now. There's a science fiction story saying, what's the best way to take a spaceship to the next galaxy? And the answer is, you do nothing, because there's nothing we can do. You wait 100 years, and will advance, and maybe then you can do it. And maybe then, if this is a problem, maybe then we'll have the scientific tools to reverse greenhouse gases, and then we can do something about it. But what we're doing now is just an expensive, burdensome way to screw poor people, to make them pay more for electricity, and to tell people in Africa and South America and Asia that, no, you can't have the cars and air conditioning we have. That's a horrible way to be. But thank you for coming with, as a skeptic, with skeptical questions. Yes, sir.
I think it's John from here. And I was wondering, to that point about climate change, so you were saying earlier that very often government is affected because the incentives aren't right for them to actually solve issues for the African American. Would you say that it's the same thing with worrying about climate change? Like maybe the science will never get to where we need it to be because the incentive just isn't there properly. And we actually do need to push for innovation and investigate that problem.
Well, it's kind of like saying the government should have an energy policy so we can plan ahead. But I would say we have an energy policy in America. It's called the free market. If there's something that delivers energy better than oil, somebody will get filthy rich inventing it. The idea that government's going to know where the research should go is highly dubious.
Well, that's what I'm saying about the incentive not being there. Because, it might be that using oil is safer now than 100 years down the line has bad consequences. And there's no sort of financial incentive to foresee that outcome down the line. It's just not needed. So no one ever had a reason immediately to think, well, we're going to keep oil.
It's true, but so what? Because you're saying we don't have an incentive to solve a problem that really isn't much of a problem and probably won't become one, and we'll be in a much better position to solve it if it does become one in 25 years? I would say, so what? When I was talking about bad incentives, and it's an argument for basic medical research, which government funds, and basic scientific research. And you could say the free market doesn't have the incentive, so government must step in, and the politicians pick projects, and maybe that's good. But I'm skeptical there too, because the NIH gives grants to my Princeton educated brother, and he's 72. Most innovation comes from people your age. But the bureaucrats, they don't know who you are. They know him from his track record, so they give it to old people. So they don't spend the money well. I meant by government incentives is that the private sector has that incentive to constantly make improvements. Government, in all departments, the incentive is cover your ass. Don't get into trouble. You want to move on to the next job, you got to obey all the rules in the rule book. Don't do anything for the first time. That's a recipe for lack of innovation. And it's innovation that's made life good. Yes?
I might that's another conversation, but by that logic though, would you want to have elections constantly so that politicians always have incentives to respond to what people vote? Because that seems where you're going with it.
It's definitely not where I meant to go. No, what I'm saying is, we can have elections every 2 years or every 8 years, but let's have limited government. I mean, this is the Constitution. Look how skinny it is. I mean, this is what created the richest, freest, best country in the world from nothing. A few basic rules. I mean, this plus pollution control rules and getting rid of slavery, this is all we need. Anybody want one of these? Let's have limited government, and then it really doesn't matter when the elections are. Like in Australia, they make you vote. That's a terrible idea. Here, people say, oh, not enough people vote. But it's a good thing that they don't, because that means your life is pretty good. If people say, I can think about sports, fashion, my girlfriend, and I don't have to worry about voting. Yes?
Hi, I'm Andrew, I'm a senior, big fan. And I was wondering if you could talk about the libertarian position on inequality stemming from things that are controllable. So you talk about some things that are result of genetics, but then there are also things like education that aren't something you can control, but that, because presumably someone else could. So I'm wondering if you think there's a place for government to provide some sort of, like, to level the playing field. It need not be through public schools, but like giving things like school vouchers and tax credits. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, for being a fan, you know the Constitution. I would, as a pure libertarian, I would say no. Not the job of government to do that. The private sector will do it. And meaning not just for-profit, but charity. And I mentioned those 40,000 mutual aid societies that were driven out. But given that government is really into education, it's spending in New Jersey about $14,000 per kid. When you do the math, that's $300,000 per classroom. Think how many good teachers you could hire for that. They squander the money because it's a government monopoly, and some of the schools are rural. In Canada, they're spending $25,000 per kid. Now, some of it's because their student body doesn't have parents and are tough to teach, but it's also because their incentives, being government, are not to improve, or just to keep doing the same thing over and over again. There's now that 40,000 mutual aid societies. That was during the Depression. America is so much richer. There are so many internet billionaires looking to run charter schools they can't get permission for, or to do things to help people. I would argue that the private sector would step in and ought to step in. You paid me for this speech, thank you, Princeton. I gave the money to a group that he's involved with called Princeton in Africa. And they try to help people in Africa. There are more of these groups all the time, and they do it better than government. They don't do it as well as the private sector, because charities can be bloated too and waste money, because they don't have that incentive of, oh my God, if I don't improve this, I'm going to go out of business, or I'm going to make less money. There's nothing like profit to focus them on, but they're still better than government. A couple more, and then let's call it a night. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Nick Rubin, I'm a freshman. This may stray away from your talk a little bit, but what would you recommend as Princeton alumnus for a freshman that's interested in television journalism?
All right, well, you should read the Constitution first. What would I recommend if you want to go into television journalism? You should do it in 1969. Then it's just beginning, and the government has this monopoly, and there are only 5 channels, and so the advertisers are going to 5 channels, and I used to get 15 million viewers sometime, and I made a lot of money. Now that's much tougher, but I would say don't go to grad school. Journalism schools are a waste of money. And try it. With YouTube now and smaller cameras, it's so much easier to do it yourself. And then you can discover, hey, I'm good at this, or hey, I like this. Plus, you have a product that a potential employer could see. And it's changing so fast now, I wouldn't presume to know where the opportunities are going to be. But I'd start by writing for the Daily Princetonian. Rich Ryan did that. Here he is now. He's not dead yet. Now he's still writing for US 1. What's it called? Yes. But to practice, to try things, and do the journalism, and when you have work to show around, you have it. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Alexander Soon. Now, I just learned about a bill that was passed in Indiana, a religious freedom bill, and essentially allows private corporations to be able to prohibit homosexual people from using their businesses or bodies. Now, as a libertarian, will say that we should define homosexuality, but also for more latitude and freedom for corporations. What do you think about this?
I think it's an interesting conflict. It's not just in Indiana. Something like 25 states have this religious freedom law. It doesn't mention homosexuality. It just says if some law conflicts with your religious beliefs, the government must have a compelling reason to override that. And I resent the bigotry of the people who have been anti-gay, and gay marriage is another step. It violates some people's religious beliefs. I disagree with them. But don't we have some freedom of association in America? This is a case, that one of the first cases, this grandmother in Washington who runs a flower show. And she's been selling flowers to Bob, who she knows is gay, for years. And I just know the story because I happened to interview her. She's friends with Bob. I like Bob. I just think that to ask me to bring flowers to cater his gay wedding is wrong. And it's not like Bob can't find 18 other florists who would serve her. It's not like this person couldn't get married. That's a big deal. Or couldn't get any food. But it's her private florist shop or the private wedding cake maker. The gay movement has gone from righteously pushing for equal rights to becoming the totalitarian movement, saying everybody must see it our way. And I think that's wrong. And I think all the retaliation against Indiana now is mostly out of ignorance. And if people knew the whole story, they wouldn't be as hostile about it. Yes, sir.
Hi. So the Leadership Texas Inequality Project and a bunch of research.
I'm sorry, but this is something that took me a long time to learn. I learned it in stuttering camp, actually. When you speak, you're speaking from your, if you take a deep breath, how did that go? You stick your chest out? No, that's fine. Stick your stomach out, and then the voice comes out much more loudly and people can hear you. It's good in a store if you want to say, are you really cheating me like that? And you're not quite loud enough for them to call the police, but they get embarrassed that other people might see. Anyway, project, what?
I apologize. So the University of Texas Inequality Project and a lot of other economists have concluded that there is a relationship between the rise of credit markets and government deregulation in the financial sector and inequality around the globe. And I was just wondering what it's like the libertarian approach to be able to look at that situation. Is there a case that we might actually need regulation in the financial industry? What are your thoughts?
Libertarians would say no. Yes, as credit expands, richer, cleverer people are going to take more advantage of it, take some big risks, and some of them are going to get really rich and the wealth disparity will grow. I mean, I don't see what the big deal is. If people start this way and the wealth disparity grows, as long as these people don't go down, which they haven't, I would think that this is the most important thing. In terms of regulation of banking and all this, people say the housing bubble was caused by a lack of regulation. But it wasn't. Or greedy banks. But greed is a constant. There have always been greedy people. And what happened in this case is the FHA and Fannie and Freddie bought the mortgages. They said, we want people to own housing in America. And so we're going to buy these mortgages. The private market will loan to enough people. And then expand it. We want you to loan to people who don't have a good credit rating or who don't have the down payment. It used to be you put 20% down. Before the crash, it was 3%. After the crash, they raised it to 5%. Big deal. Now, a few months ago, they lowered it back down to 3%. We're going to have another bubble. All this encouraging of people to own homes. And so the banks said, we can loan this money, and if it's a bad loan, so what? The government's buying the stuff from us, as long as we can convince the government. And the bureaucrats are always stupider than the people in the private sector because, not always, often stupider because there's more money in the private sector. They just dumped it off, and what would have been a small bubble became a big bubble. The goal is home ownership, and that is good. It's a good investment sometimes for people, but it also builds community. You care more about the neighborhood if you own a home, so it's nice. Canada doesn't have any of that stuff. They don't have 30-year mortgages. You renegotiate usually every 5 years. They don't have an FHA. They don't have Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Home ownership rate in Canada is higher than in the United States. But in America, we have the home builders that we we have the left saying, well, you got to subsidize this for the needy. You got the right saying you got to help business, you got the home builder lobby, and they feed money to the politicians and they keep all these subsidies going. The whole mortgage deduction, that shouldn't exist. That's corporate welfare for rich people, right? Corporate welfare, it's welfare for rich people. Because most of the rich people get the biggest deductions. And you only get the deduction if you itemize, and half the people don't itemize. So government policy makes it worse. All right, last question. Yes, sir?
Hi, my name is Roger. So you mentioned several examples of structures where the free market works really well in America. Can you give some examples of structures or industries where currently the free market isn't allowed to work, but you believe there's sort of strong standards for that particular area?
I'm sorry, where the free market isn't allowed to work, did you say?
As in, like, because there's government regulation. So it's not allowed to take it away. But for that area to sort of be like freer in that sense, like there wasn't as much government intervention, that area would be the most benefited.
Yes, all of them practically. Take housing. We have zoning rules now which forbid small homes. Some people want to build little homes. You're not allowed to in Washington. 4 people built them and they won't let them move in. It's illegal. All these zoning rules. Houston has no zoning rules. Housing is cheaper. And lots of people are moving to Houston. Medicine, the FDA. Last example, because it's a good thought experiment. But intuitively, I said, well, I'm glad there's an FDA. There's some agency that makes sure any drug I take is safe and effective. That's their mandate. And to do that, they have tests. Well, I don't want to take something that's not safe. These greedy snake oil sellers will poison me to make money. So, great. Yay, we have an FDA. And my libertarian doctor brother has been co-opted. He says, yeah, we got to have an FDA. And some years ago, the FDA announced it was approving a new beta blocker. And at the press conference, it said, this new drug will save 14,000 American lives a year. And no one at the press conference stood up to say, great, but didn't that also mean you killed 14,000 people last year? And the year before that? People don't think that way, but it did mean that. It now takes about 10 years, about $1 billion to get the drug approved. It all started after thalidomide, this drug women took during pregnancy. It stopped morning sickness, but some gave birth to kids with terrible birth defects. The problem is you can see the problem. You can take a picture of the deformed baby and put her on the cover of Life magazine, as Life magazine did, and people are horrified. But you don't know who would have been saved by the new beta blocker. I don't know whose picture to take. It's the battle between the seen and the unseen. And without an FDA, it's scary. What would happen? The free market would step in. There would be 8 private FDA-like things, maybe underwriters' laboratories, maybe consumer reports. And not being bureaucratic and government-heavy, they would rate the drugs and free individuals to make their own choices. Some people would be, I'm dying, I'm going to try something. And we learned from those experiments. Most of us would say, I don't trust these businesses. I'm going to make sure it's got an A rating from the best insurance ratings or something before I try it. And from those free choices in competition, we have more drugs, less delay. We'd all be better off. So please fight for things like that. Thank you for hearing me out today. Free swag. Yeah. They can make it so one intelligible. They express himself.
Alright, so we're a group of college Republicans in Princeton. President Paul, Valerie, and Allison right here. Allison is the chair of the file for this.
All right, so did I convince you to be libertarians to the Republican? Oh, one of these is, okay.
I was fairly libertarian, so I was called Republican president too, but I'm still probably more conservative. But I have my libertarian streaks that I go out every now and then. Right, yeah. It was nice to meet you. So, thank you. I'm actually Princeton much more. We got Robin George, we got Charlie Rosen, econ department. He's a great libertarian economic professor. So he does a lot of good American enterprise.
It's like you're bubbling into your shaking hands.
Yeah, I saw that.
I just want to make sure now. I know I'm not even much of a Republican either, but
We also promised to get rid of the education department, and then did so.
I did think so.
Those are comments.
Yeah, all you do is press the shutter.
What do you think about it for,
You always forget. We're the subway. That's the subway story. And we find out how far.
And then you wake up and say, and you end that popsicle, you got some ice cream treats for you.
right?
Yeah.
So, I'm going again to some sense to say, we're old, we don't need to
See on TV.
A friend of mine's, and you had our reunion, cheeky tiger director on that.
video.